Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here for Penny Black with my sixth in a series of 10 videos counting down my top 10 favorite stamps, dies, techniques, and design ideas featuring Penny Black's newest collection called Timeless. And today's video is all about one particular stamp that's in this collection. It's called Floral Twist, and I will be doing a double take with this. So two cards with two similar but different techniques in creating that. And before we begin, I just wanted to let you know I will have the full supply list up on screen at the very end of the video. So if you want to check it out in more detail at that time, you can just hit pause and check it all out. So here's a look at that stamp called Floral Twist that I'll be using, and a closer look at the first card that we will be creating with this stamp. This stamp looks very detailed, like it would be really hard to do or difficult. It's actually a super easy to stamp. So I'm starting by doing this in my Misty stamp positioning tool, and I'm stamping onto smooth heavyweight cardstock. It's about 110 pounds, and I'm coloring onto my stamp using memento markers. So in this video I am going to use memento markers on this first card and then Tombow dual brush pens on the second card. Any of your water soluble type markers like the memento markers, distress markers, the Tombow dual brush pens all work really great for this technique. So you're just going to selectively color onto the stamp, and this allows you to get different colors onto different areas of the stamp. So I started by just coloring onto the leaf areas and stamping those onto the cardstock. Now when you apply color using a marker, it's not going to give you quite as even coverage as like the solid flat part of an ink pad. So sometimes it is helpful to be able to do multiple stampings, and that's why I am doing this in my Misty stamp positioning tool. This also allows me to work on only small sections at a time, so the color that I put onto the stamp does not have time to dry before I go to stamp it. Now if you wanted to give this a really loose watercolor look, or if you did not have a stamp positioning tool, you could do this on an acrylic block. And what I would recommend then is to color the entire image and then lightly mist it with water before stamping. Now I do have to mention, shame on me, did not have my stamp totally clean before I started, which caused this purple color that I put on, this light purple, to be a little bit discolored. It looked pretty to me, and same with this yellow, but it's not the true color of the marker. So if you have these same markers and you use the same colors and it looks a little bit different, that is why. If you like this look, then just don't clean your stamp very well. But before I do the next card, I will scrub it down really well. And I will have all the exact colors that I am using listed, like I said, at the very end of the video up on screen. I typically tend to grab for more reds and oranges, blues for my cards. So I really enjoyed on this card kind of mixing it up and doing more sort of purples and shades of lavender, just to give it a different look. So basically all I did on this card was sort of layer on the colors on the stamp and stamp onto the white paper. And then I went and stamped a sentiment. This is from our sentiment set, and then I added a die cut butterfly, just cut from that heavyweight white cardstock. This is from the Butterfly and Leaves set, and I love this butterfly. It has all this really great stitching, and it's a great size just for embellishing the card. I put this onto a purple note card with just a thin strip of burgundy cardstock along the side as a border, and the card was complete. So this is a very simple card to make. Oh, and I did add one other little butterfly up there in the left-hand corner. But it's very simple to make and very fun. Now this next card we'll be doing uses marker stamping, but adds a few more steps. So if you want to take it to the next level and try something a little different, here's how you can do a similar card but different. So here I am doing just like I did before. I'm going to color directly onto my stamp, which is well clean this time. And with my colors, I'm starting with the green, working in small sections so that that marker ink does not dry before I stamp it. If you think something you have colored has dried just a little bit, you can huff on the stamp, so just kind of blow some hot air onto the stamp, and that'll kind of re-moisten the ink and make it easier to stamp. I'm just getting those greens in. For additional shading, now I'm taking a second color of green and sort of flicking that on towards the center of those stems and leaves. And I will let you know the stamps that I'm using and have been using in all of these timeless top 10 videos. These are prototype stamps. So the back, when you see when I flip it over to stamp, there's not the printed image on there for me to see. That is just because it's a prototype stamp. So any of the stamps that you would purchase will have the printing of the actual image on the back of the stamp, which makes it easier when you're lining things up and going to stamp. If you aren't sure where you want to put your colors, it is helpful sometimes to have the packaging near you, and that can give you some ideas of how to get a nice balanced look with your colors. So you could switch up what they are, but put them all in the same places. So for example, I'm putting the yellows all in the same places as I did on the first card, but just switching up the reds for the pinks and just changing the color scheme, but not where the colors are located on the stamp. I hope that makes sense. You can add a little extra shading closer to the stems on these yellow ones by going in with a brownish orange marker. And like I said, all the colors for all the markers will be listed. Tombow Dual Brush pens have a number system, so those numbers will be listed in the supply list up on screen at the very end of the video. So because the stamp actually has smaller flowers and smaller details to it, it actually makes it easier to stamp using markers because it will take the color really well on those small details. When you have to stamp large expanses of solid areas, that's where it gets a little bit trickier with markers because you see the brush strokes of the markers when you apply it onto the paper. So this stamp, while it looks detailed and small, is actually easier to do with markers. So I've done all my stamping of these flowers in this stamp. I'm going to thoroughly clean my stamp, but I am not moving the stamp and I am not moving my paper in the stamp positioning tool. I'm just drying it with a paper towel. And then I'm going to come in with an anti-static bag and then Versamark ink. And I'm going to actually stamp right over the top of everything we just did with the markers with that Versamark ink. I'm going to do it a couple of times just to be sure I got a really good impression. And then I will remove this from my stamp positioning tool and sprinkle it with clear embossing powder. And what this is going to do now, when I heat this to set and melt that embossing powder, it's going to seal in all of those colors that we stamped. I continued that same process on the right hand side of the card, and now you can see I can go in with my inks and blend out the inks onto the background, and because those flowers are embossed with that clear embossing powder, they're going to resist those inks and still stay nice and bold and vibrant despite putting darker colors onto the background. So I'm using Memento inks. You could also use distress inks. You just don't want to use any permanent inks. You want inks that can be resisted by that embossing. I'm adding a little bit of antique linen distress ink, and I used Bamboo Leaves and Olive Grove Memento inks for that grass at the bottom. And this is really so beautiful in real life, and it's just fun to see the background recede into the background and all those flowers stay really bold and vibrant. I'm applying my inks using ink blending tools with the foam pad. Some of them are the Tim Holtz ink blending tool with the foam pads, and some are the Sukaneko sponge daubers. I just have a variety of different ink applicator tools in my stash, and I try to keep one for each color. So there's no rhyme or reason to that. I like both. I think they both work really well. I start off of the edge and work my way on in a circular motion. That is Danube Blue for Up in the Sky. And I'm also going to darken it up just a little bit around the edges with Nautical Blue. I like to start with a pretty light pressure and light color and build up the color by doing multiple layers. I don't want to press too hard because then you can really get some spongy lines on the background. So more layers and a lighter pressure works well for me. I wanted even more contrast down here at the bottom, so I first grabbed my Gathered Twigs Distress ink to apply that down at the bottom, and then I found I wanted to go even darker with that so that the green stems popped, the ones that we had stamped and embossed. So after I do this light layer of Gathered Twigs, I will take some Memento ink in the color of Rich Cocoa and add that along the bottom portion of the card. And then you can really start to see those stems show up and pop a little bit more. If your background is too close to the same color as your stamping, then it's not going to show very well. So you either want to go lighter or go darker so that your stamping pops and shines through. So I'm just kind of going back and playing around with applying this ink till I'm happy with the effect. Then I'm going to take a dry paper towel and just lightly buff over all that stamping, and that will remove any excess ink that has landed on top of it. Now I stamp my sentiment, and just to finish things off and give it even more of a magical look, I took a very light Prismacolor pencil and I'm just adding a touch of it here and there along the stems. And I like how this almost gives it a dewy, sparkling look with that darker background. And that completes the card. It's a standard, both of these are standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch cards, which were then mounted onto the note cards. You can get a look there at how beautifully that embossed stamping resists that background inking. And here's another look of the pair of the cards together. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website and blog. And I will link to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And stay tuned. Here is that supply list as promised. Thanks for watching.